Hi you guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Carly. I am a labor and postpartum doula, and on my channel I make content about pregnancy and labor and motherhood and pretty much everything that falls in between. And in today's video I am so excited to finally share something that is near and dear to my heart and that is very, very special to me, and that is the story of my home birth and how I had my first baby. His name is Wilder. If you don't know, I had him this past September. He's now 6 months old. I remember being pregnant and watching every single video I could find about other people's experience with their planned home births and their water births. As women, we've kind of had this fear instilled in us over my entire life, this idea that labor is this really scary, painful, awful event that we need to go and, seek help from somebody else at the hospital to essentially save us from this, unbelievable pain that we're going to experience. And the only reason that I even have a different perspective on how labor can go is because of all of the other stories that I have heard from other people who have gone through labor. As a person who has experienced an extremely, extremely positive and uplifting home birth story, I feel like it's really just in my duty to share it with everyone that I can, so that if you are considering having a home birth, or if you're thinking about different birth options for you and for your family and what might be best for you, that you have another story to hear, and hopefully it can be helpful to someone who maybe was in the same position that I was in whenever I was deciding how I wanted to labor and bring my baby into the world. So, this is future editing me, and if you know me at all, you know that I can talk about birth for hours on end. Yes, I'm talking about you, but that's why this channel exists in the first place, right? So because of that, this video is a little bit longer than my usual content. So in order to make this video the most helpful, I am putting a timestamp here of the specific details I share and when I share them. That way, if you're only looking for certain information or a portion of the story, you can find exactly what you want to hear and jump straight to it. Okay, now on with the story. So like I said, I was a doula before I ever got pregnant. And so I knew a lot about home birth. I knew about birth centers. I knew about hospital birth and kind of what to expect in all different arenas. I had always had the intention of having a home birth before I actually got pregnant myself. But when the time came to decide what I wanted to do, I was actually pretty intimidated to have a home birth. And I really fell on the stories of other people to kind of guide me and uplift me and give me a little bit more insight into what made the most sense for me. I decided on it because, like I said, I really wanted to have a water birth first and foremost. So I already knew some hospitals wouldn't be an option because they do not let you deliver in the water. They'll let you labor in the water, but locally I don't have any hospital options that let you deliver the baby in the water. So I already knew that wasn't an option for me. I was considering doing a birth center birth. However, we only have one birth center locally. I really just was set on the idea of having a home birth, and there was a midwife who was local at the time, and she was really big on being more hands-off whenever it came to delivery. And I loved the idea of being able to have, my own space in my own house and being able to kind of freely move and do what I needed to do to work through labor and kind of let my body do what it was meant to do in the first place. And so I had that opportunity because she kind of shared that same mindset. I am definitely a homebody, to say the least, and being able to stay in my house is probably the most comfortable place that I could possibly be to labor and kind of go through that really intense experience being at home, being able to be naked if I wanted to and walk around wherever and get in the shower, get in the tub, eat whatever I wanted to eat. I could go outside, all these things that I felt like were really important to me. I could have, the lights down and be very, very relaxed and kind of focused on me and my body and what my body was doing. And it just seemed like the perfect fit for me. Not only that, but my partner Drew was extremely supportive of it. He definitely at first was a little bit nervous about the idea, but after doing research and kind of seeing the different outcomes for people who have low risk healthy pregnancies, he was completely on board and totally supportive. And so having that support throughout, my pregnancy and labor was just essential. On top of that, I got a lot of people in my family really on board with the idea as well. If you haven't seen it, there is an amazing documentary about home birth and about hospital birth and birth centers and just kind of the whole multitude of options. If you haven't seen it, it's called The Business of Being Born, and it is fantastic. I had my entire family watch it, and it really helped shift some perspectives on birth and kind of, what the different options are. So those are all kind of some of the reasons as to why I decided to have a home birth. But beyond that, I want to tell you a little bit more about like my birth team and the different people that I had in place before I actually went into labor. So I hired my midwife, who is a practicing home birth midwife, and she also had a birth assistant that she brought with her. So I had 2 medical professionals on my staff. In addition to my medical staff, I also decided to hire a labor and delivery doula. And if I can tell you one thing that you need to do, whether you're having a home birth, hospital birth, birth center, whatever your decision is, hire a doula. It was the best decision I could have made. When I look back on my birth and think about like, thank God I did that, the number one thing I think is thank God I hired my doula, because she was invaluable to me. Having support from a doula is unlike, you can't get that support anywhere else. And she was such an amazing piece of my entire birth story that I will just always remember. So if you're thinking about getting a doula, just do it. They are so amazing, and definitely something that you want to do your research on. Not all doulas are created equally, but she was so wonderful. And then in addition to that, I decided that I wanted to have a birth photographer so that I could remember the whole experience. I knew at the end of the day, I would probably not remember a lot of it. So I wanted to have someone to document as much of it as possible. And so there was a local photographer who was so talented that I'm going to include so many pictures that she took from the day in this video, but she was amazing. So I had her on my birth team as well. So before anything even happened, we had a really solid group of people established. I felt really confident in the team that I had put together, and I knew that I had all the support that I could ask for. So to get into the story of the actual birth a little bit more, Wilder was supposed to be, his due date was September 16th. And so whenever that day started coming around, I started to notice about a week before, I think it was the Friday before he was born September 14th. So I think that would have been September 6th, that Friday. I had started to feel kind of like, what I thought were contractions. I've never had a baby before. I've supported people in labor and I've been a birth worker, but I don't know what it actually feels like to have a contraction. So I thought I was having contractions, and they lasted from about midnight until 5 a.m. and they were really consistent. They were coming, every few minutes. I wasn't tracking them exactly, but I could tell they were very consistent. I did get up out of bed and I came into the living room and I was on my yoga ball, just kind of working through them. And that happened from about midnight until 5 a.m. And then come 5 a.m., they just totally petered out and nothing happened. So that was a week before. And then the Wednesday before he was born, the same thing happened. It was midnight to 5 a.m. I was having the same kind of contractions. They were coming consistently. I did the same thing. And then come 5 a.m., just like that, they petered out again. And I was like, man, what the why isn't this going beyond 5 a.m.? So I was really confused. I was at that point really ready to have the baby, and I just didn't know why they were kind of stalling. I tried to keep my eye out for other signs of labor, but nothing was really happening. That was kind of it. And so I just tried to be patient and not focus on it, which at that point was really hard because I was just really ready to not be pregnant anymore at that point. So come that Friday, we decided to go out for a big dinner. We went to a French restaurant that's really delicious that's down the road from our house, and we kind of did it out. We had a bunch of food and desserts and had a really great night and just tried to relax. And that night, same thing happened. So right around midnight, my contractions started. This time I decided to start tracking my contractions, and I downloaded this app called Contraction Timer Encounter. And if you are pregnant, definitely get an app like this. It was so helpful to like focus on something and kind of watch what was actually happening. It gave me a clearer, mindset of what was going on, because when you're in labor, you have no idea like what's actually happening. So I started to track everything. And at this point, this was like 3:45 in the morning. Everything had been really consistent. They were coming every like 3 to 4 minutes or so. And they were lasting for about a minute. And so if you don't know, there is this rule. It's called like 411 or 511, 311, different numbers for different people. But it essentially means your contractions are coming at least every 4 minutes. They're lasting for 1 minute long. And that happened for longer than an hour. So at this point, that had definitely been happening. I hadn't woken Drew up or anything like that. I was just kind of like going through the contractions. They weren't that painful at this point. They were definitely like I had to breathe through them, but I didn't feel like I needed to ring the alarm at this point. So I was just kind of in the living room with my yoga ball. I had the lights down low and I had like my salt lamp on. It was actually one of my like favorite parts of labor because I just felt very in tune with my body. It was a really just kind of like peaceful time of labor, and I knew things were starting to pick up, and I just wanted to relax so that, it wasn't going to stop at 5 a.m. again like it had been. I did reach out to my doula and my midwife, and I just let them know what was going on. I knew I wasn't in like active labor at this point, but I wanted to let them know that I felt like I was in early labor. Around 6 a.m., I went into the bedroom and woke Drew up and let him know what was going on. And I needed him to wake up because we had the birth tub set up in our bedroom, but we didn't have any water filled in, obviously. So we have a hose that we would connect to the shower head to fill up the tub. And the hose that we had did not fit the shower head. So we needed to get like an adapter piece, and we didn't have that yet. So I woke Drew up and I was like, listen, like you got to get up. We've got to go get this because today's the day, and like we got to fill this tub up. I need this water. He got up, and as soon as the store was open, he went to the store and got it. And while he was gone, I was still tracking my contractions. And this was right about the time that the contractions would slow down whenever I had them previously. And so I was keeping an eye on them. And again, they started to slow down. They were coming every, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, like they just kept slowing down. And then all of a sudden the frequency or like the length of the contraction was going down too. Instead of lasting for a minute, they were lasting for 40 seconds and like 45 seconds instead of a full minute. I called him and was like, listen, don't panic. Like, don't worry. I think things are slowing down. So no need to rush. I was craving cantaloupe. So I asked him to pick up some cantaloupe, and he brought cantaloupe back with donuts and like breakfast for everybody. The contractions never actually stopped. They just slowed down. He came back. I called my doula and midwife and let them both know. And my doula, she lives about an hour away, and she was in town visiting with another client. And so she was like, I'll call you whenever I'm done with this meeting and check back in. So we're all hanging out in the living room. We're watching like Queer Eye and eating cantaloupe and donuts. And I was having contractions, but they were like every 15 minutes. When I talked to my doula on the phone, she gave me some suggestions on what I could do in the meantime, just because there are some things you can do to kind of encourage your contractions to continue. And one of those things is the Miles circuit. So essentially it is a set of 3 different positions that you do for 30 minutes each. And 2 of them are laying down positions. And so she was like, try not to, focus on it too much. Like try to think about other things. Try not to use too much energy, like reserve as much of your energy as you can, because there is this inclination, like once you think you're in labor, you like want to do anything to keep it going. I took her advice and I went into the bedroom and I did the Miles circuit for a little bit, and it didn't immediately do anything for me. And then all of a sudden I started to get really nauseous. I was keeping my eye out for signs of labor. There are different things that indicate that you are in active labor. You can have your bloody show, you can lose your mucus plug, you can start, getting really sick and throwing up or having diarrhea, your water breaks. Obviously, all these things are indicators that you're in labor, and I didn't have any of those. I was waiting for like some sort of big sign that I was really in active labor, and I just wasn't getting that. Someone started cooking in the kitchen, and it smelled like the smell of the food was making me really sick. And so I went into my mom's room. She was staying in our guest room. And so I went into my mom's room. There's something about, I don't know why, there's something comforting about being in your mom's bed, even though it's like my guest room. There was still something comforting about like being in my mom's bed. So I went in there and I laid down and I kept doing the Miles circuit. And at this point, my contractions were 15 minutes apart, but they were so powerful. They were super intense contractions when they came. They were lasting for about a minute, but they were still consistently every 15 minutes. And I was like, this is so confusing. I don't understand why they're so far apart, but so painful. And this is kind of when things started to change. Like my attitude started to change. Whenever we were all hanging out in the living room, like things were still funny to me. Like people would make jokes about stuff and like it was a good time and like I could respond and think clear and it was fun. But at this point, when I went into that room, like that's when shit changed and I wasn't like in the same mood anymore. So I was having to focus really hard on my contractions and breathing through them. I couldn't really talk anymore during the contractions, but they were still 15 minutes apart and that was so bizarre to me. So I stayed in there for a little bit. I got in the shower and I had a couple of contractions in there, but my shower has a door that closes and I was feeling really claustrophobic in the shower. And so I stood in there for probably like 3 contractions worth. We have a removable shower head and I was just, spraying the water on my belly and on my back and it felt really nice. So I stayed in there for a little bit, but not too long. And then I came out and spent a lot of time on the yoga ball. And I really liked having like the yoga ball out in front of me and sitting on my knees and leaning over on the yoga ball and kind of like rocking side to side whenever the contractions would come on. I felt like that was the best position. It just like opened my hips up really nice and it was really comfortable and it helped me kind of get into kind of a meditative state whenever I was having contractions. So I got on my bed. My knees were hurting because I'd been doing it so much. So I got up on the bed with the yoga ball and I was leaned over on the yoga ball and like rocking back and forth. And that was really, really helpful. But I kept feeling like I was like something was going to come out, like not pressure, but it was like whenever I'd have a contraction, it just felt like I was going to pee or like water was going to come out or like something. I felt really exposed, not like sitting on something, but still my water hadn't broken. I wasn't bleeding. I didn't lose a mucus plug. Like there was no indication at all that anything was going on except for the contractions. So my doula calls me at this point and I'm getting pretty vocal with my contractions. I'm definitely breathing through them, not super loud at this point, but I was definitely moaning a little through them. So my doula calls me and we don't have service inside of our house. So if you needed to use your phone, like you had to go outside to the top of the hill. So I like walk my pregnant ass up the hill and talk to her on the phone. And she was talking to me and I had a contraction while we were on the phone and she was listening to me and she was like, it definitely sounds like you're in labor. I'm happy to come now. If you don't want me to come, that's fine, but I am happy to come and be with you now. And in my head at this point, I was 12 hours away from having the baby. So I was like, no, you should go home and take a nap because I feel like this is going to be, late tonight or early in the morning. Like things are definitely starting, but I don't want to ring the alarm too soon. I don't want to call in the troops and nothing actually is happening because like I said, before this, all of my contractions had started to peter out. And at this point, I was only having those consistent contractions for about an hour. And so I didn't want to assemble the team and have everybody sitting around, staring at me and then my contractions stop. So I told her just not to come and I walked back in and I was telling Drew and my mom that I told her not to come and they stared back at me and were like, what? Like, why the hell did you tell her to go home? Because she lives an hour away. They were shocked. They're like, why didn't you have her come? And at the time, I just didn't feel like it was time for her to come yet. I went back into our bedroom and I was rocking on the yoga ball. And like I said, I just kind of felt like I just felt really, really exposed. And so I was like, I'm going to go and sit on the toilet because I felt like I had to take, the biggest shit of my life. So I went and sat on the toilet. Also, if you hear Wilder crying, Drew is watching him in the other room. He's not alone, I promise. But I don't know why, but I really wanted to be alone. I did not want like anybody touching me. I didn't want anybody near me. We had practiced all these things with our doula beforehand to do, some coping mechanisms with like my rebozo and some counter pressure and swaying and different positions that I could do with Drew to kind of help work through the contractions, but I didn't want any of that. Like, I wanted to be alone. I would literally shut the door and be alone in my own space and like not want anybody around me at all. And that was kind of surprising because I really like, whenever I'm in pain, I love for people to scratch my back. I just was not about it. I was like, get away, shut the door. I need to be alone and like in my own space and really just focus my energy on what's happening and pay attention to my body. And so that's what I did. So I went into the bathroom, shut the door, turned the lights down. I had a candle lit and I was on the toilet. And like I said, we went out for a big dinner the night before. I don't usually indulge the way that I did, but we ate so much decadent food. So in my head, I really just thought that I needed to take a huge shit. I'm in the bathroom laboring on the toilet and also thinking that I'm about to poop. And my mom comes in. It had been maybe like 45 minutes. And at this point, the contractions were pretty intense. So I'm being pretty vocal, like pretty loud. And my mom opens the door and she is like, hey, you know, you've been in here for a while. Have you had any movement or anything? And I was like, no poop. I don't know what the problem is. And I still hadn't had, my water hadn't breaking. At this point, my water hadn't broke and I still didn't lose a mucus plug and I didn't have a bloody show, at least I didn't know of. So I was sitting on the toilet and I was just really like, I felt like I was hitting a wall at that point. Like I started crying and I was like, I am in a lot of pain. I just want to get in the tub, but I wasn't getting in the tub yet because if you get in the water too soon, it can relax your muscles a little too much and it can actually slow your contractions. And I had only been having contractions for about an hour. I don't want to slow down labor. I want it to continue, but I just want to get in the water. Like it's all I want to do. It just feels right. And I need to get in the water. Here I am like sobbing on the toilet and my mom is like, fine, we'll get in the water. Don't worry about it. Like, let's go ahead and get you in the water. And at this point, we have one small bathroom. And so my mom and Drew, they would come into the bathroom and whenever they came in to check on me, they were always like very, calm and zen, using low voices. And then as soon as they would leave the bathroom, they were like worker bees. They were running around like yelling to each other and doing all this stuff. And I could still hear them outside of the bathroom. And at the time, I couldn't communicate how funny it was. But afterwards, I thought it was hilarious. The fact that they would come in and like be calm with me and then leave the room and be like, they are working hard to get the tub filled up. And I am having very, very strong contractions at this point. So I started tracking them again because up until now, I wasn't even keeping track of them because they were 15 minutes apart. They were painful, but they were 15 minutes apart. And then all of a sudden, like that, they started being 3 minutes apart. And I was like, wow, these are coming way faster than they were. So I started to track them again. Right around 1 o'clock, my contractions were lasting for a minute each. And they were coming every 2 minutes and 50 seconds, 3 minutes, 3 minutes. So they were coming really quickly and they were just as intense as they were when they were 15 minutes apart. So this is when shit hit the fan. So Drew is trying to hook the hose up to the shower because this is the bathroom that we were using to fill the tub up. So I'm on the toilet laboring, like wailing, and he is coming in and like trying, like taking stuff off the shower and hooking the hose up and trying to fill up the tub. So he also is at this point trying to get in touch with our doula and our midwife. I had just talked to my doula an hour ago telling her don't come. And at this point I needed her to come. So as soon as she got home, she had to turn around and come back. And Drew called her, she answered immediately and she was on her way, but it was going to be an hour before she got there. Drew called and texted the midwife, no response. The water had been filled up in the tub, so I was able to get in. And as soon as I got in, I was like, oh, thank God I can finally get in this water. And at that point, I got in the same position that I had been in on the yoga ball. I was on my knees, kind of squatted down, leaning over the side of the tub with my head turned. And I didn't move from that position for an hour. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't look around because I still didn't know that I was really in active labor. Like I didn't feel like I had all of the signs that I needed to be like, yes, you're in active labor and yes, you're about to have your baby. Like I, in my head, thought I was at least 12 hours away. And all I could think at this point was, how the fuck am I gonna do this for 12 more hours? Oh. Hi, baby. This is the man of the hour. You know what we're talking about? I'm talking about your birthday and the day that you were born. Do you remember? At At this point, I had had zero medical attention. My midwife was not there, and I hadn't had any medical person like evaluating where I was at in labor. I was really just going off of what I was feeling and what I knew about labor. And I wasn't convinced that I was actually in labor. You get into this mindset whenever you're in labor. It's a really wild kind of like drugged out state where you've got all these like hormones flowing through your body, and I really didn't know like left from right. The only thing that I could focus on was breathing through my contractions and relaxing in between my contractions, because I was starting to lose it a little at this point. I was starting to get a little emotional because I didn't have anybody on my team there. And that is definitely a 1000% no one's fault. But I didn't have anybody there except for Drew and my mom, and they were doing everything that they could possibly do. They were doing everything right. They were doing what they knew to do to keep me calm and to keep me comfortable. But when you're in labor, it doesn't really matter. The emotions can sometimes take over. And so I am being very vocal at this point. I definitely didn't anticipate being as loud as I was. I went into labor with the intention of being very focused with my breathing and being very internal and be very like zen. And that was not the case. At this point, I was screaming during my contractions. I was screaming like out and up into the room. Vocalizing during labor is so important for so many people. It's just this like innate reaction you have. I couldn't make those sounds again, even if I tried. And I was yelling like up and out into the room, which was like putting a lot of energy out into the space instead of using my voice to kind of like work my baby down. I was just screaming in pain out into the open because I was a little like kind of like a bucking bronco. Like I didn't have any guidance and I didn't know what was going on. And honestly, like labor takes over. Like your baby's gonna come out when your baby's ready to come out. And even though I wasn't really 1000% sure it was happening, like it was happening whether I was aware of it or not. And that was overwhelming for a minute. So my mom and Drew have assembled the team, right? Everyone knows that I'm in labor. So the doula knows. Drew told the photographer as well. And the photographer was like, well, let the doula get there first and then she'll let me know if I need to come or not. And so we're all kind of waiting on the doula to get there. And we reached out to the midwife, still no response from the midwife. So I'm in the tub laboring. My mom is tracking my contractions with the app. I would tell her to start and stop it, and it really gave me something to focus on, which was really helpful because before that, I was just kind of like loose and all over the place. So I had her start to track the contractions, and Drew got a cup of water, and all I needed him to do was pour water on my back. That was his sole job from about 1:20 until the baby was born. He had a cup of water, and he was just taking water, pouring it on my back, taking water, pouring it on my back. And then when I had a contraction, I didn't make him stop. And then when I was done with him, have him do it again, pour the water on my back. And it was a godsend. Like it was the only thing that I could focus on that was very rhythmic and just relaxing to me. And so that was his one and only job was to do that. And they were saying, everything right. They were doing everything right, but it didn't matter to me at the time. At the time, all I wanted was my birth team, like the people that I hired who knew what they were doing, who have experienced labor before. Obviously, my mom had kids of her own, but there's just something about having guidance from somebody who does it for her profession that was calming to me. So they're doing their best to keep me calm. I am in a lot of pain at this point, and I still wasn't convinced that I was having the baby. I really just wasn't. I was like, we're 12 hours out, and how the fuck am I gonna do this for 12 hours? I even had this moment where I was like, even if I go to the hospital now, like it's probably too far. Like I'm probably too far dilated that they wouldn't even give me an epidural at this point. So like focus, stay where you are, and like don't panic. That was kind of the like pep talk I had to give myself. I labored alone in the tub or with my mom and Drew for about an hour before the doula got there. So I remember hearing my doula's voice. And like I said, I was in that position with my head down, my eyes closed. I hadn't moved for an hour. And I heard her voice and I opened my eyes and I looked up at her and I smiled and I was like, hi, Gabe. I was so happy to see her. And she came in and she met my energy. She was amazing. She like got down on the floor with me. I had my arms hanging over. She grabbed my arms and she like grounded me so quickly. She reestablished my focus. She, was talking me through a contraction once and she like guided my screaming. She was like, amazing that you're screaming, keep screaming. But instead of screaming up and out and like losing your energy, moan down into your baby. Help your screams push your baby out instead of screaming out into the room. And she said that and I was like, that is brilliant. Like, what a good idea. And it immediately changed my focus and the way that I was screaming. And it was such a game changer. She got a cold, wet rag and like put it on the back of my neck. She got essential oils and like fanned them in front of my face. I think she had a combination. I think it was peppermint and lavender. And she fanned it in front of my face and it like reinvigorated me. So when she got there and like got me regrounded, I was like, oh, okay, like she's here, I'm good, like we're gonna be okay, all is well. And I think it's go time. Like I think I'm gonna like start, getting into active labor now, right? Like I'm ready to go. Now, the way that we had the room set up, I wanted all the lights off and I wanted like my salt lamp and candles lit. I wanted the room to be, calm and relaxed and low lighting, and it was perfect. It was exactly what I wanted. And the doula walked in and she was like, we're gonna need some kind of light because you can't see anything. She was like, it's pitch black in here, and we need to see into the tub. We need to see what's going on. So this is when my mom goes and gets like a lamp and put the lamp on. I hear my doula talking to Drew and she said, I heard her say something about telling my photographer to get here. And I heard her say, if you want pictures of the labor, you need to call her now and she needs to get here immediately. And so when I heard her say that, I was like, oh, am I about to have the baby? Like, am I really far along? Am I in labor? I don't know why. It was impossible for me to understand that I was about to have the baby because I didn't have like none of the other signs that I was looking for were there. And I just thought that I was gonna be in a long, painful labor. So she said that and it kind of like clicked to me that I was in labor, like active labor, like transition labor. Like I had already gotten to 10 centimeters and just didn't know it. So at that point, like it hit me and I was like, all right, man, it's go time. Like you're about to have your baby. And that reinvigorated me so much. I was already head down, but then I like really got head down. Like I really started focusing on what was happening and like feeling things. I remember my moans were really shaky and like I felt very like ooh, whenever I was moaning, and I had a moment where I thought I was gonna throw up. I didn't throw up the entire time, but I had a moment where I thought I was gonna throw up, and it was during a contraction and I was like, I need a bucket. And I like dry heaved a couple of times, but I never actually threw up. But I remember moaning and being really like deep, low moans, but they were also really shaky at times. Like my body was like vibrating, and my hands were shaking. Like it was intense for sure. And there was this moment where I felt like, this is the only way I could describe it. I felt like someone had taken a blown up balloon and was trying to push it through my vaginal canal. And it was making that like squeaky sound, like squeaking like a balloon through something. And it was so weird to me. I was like, there's no way that's the baby coming out because it just feels squeaky. And I had a contraction and I felt this drop, this movement of what inevitably was the baby's head. And I felt it kind of move down and like move into my vaginal canal. I was resisting the urge to reach down to feel because I knew that if I reached down and didn't feel anything, that I would be so disappointed and like I would lose a lot of my energy. So I resisted reaching down for a really, really long time. At this point, my birth assistant had come in. The midwife's birth assistant arrived before the midwife did. And she comes in and I also had another moment of just like there's a medical professional here. Like, thank God, just in case anything were to go poorly, I have a medical professional. She starts asking me questions. She has her Doppler. She's trying to get, the heart rate on the baby. And she asked me a question. She said something about like, do I feel any pressure on my perineum? And I remember her asking me that and me being like, I mean, I'm pretty sure he's in my vagina. Like, I'm pretty sure he's about to come out. Like, I think the perineum pressure is long over. Like, I was feeling that an hour ago. And I was trying to explain that to her, but I just couldn't talk. I was so focused on what was going on. I could not communicate effectively. And so right after that, I decided to reach down and feel. So I put my hand down, and all I could feel was this like sack of water. And I was like, he's still in the sack. And it clicked. His water had never broke, and he was still in the sack, which is called being on call. And I had also seen flashes like from photography, so I knew my birth photographer was there. I was like, okay, everyone's here except my midwife. But I have a team of people here. Everyone's here. She's taking pictures, great. And I sat up and I like screamed, and I was like, he's in the sack. And if you're a birth worker, you know why everyone was so excited. It's like 1 out of every 80,000 births, babies are born on call. So I reached out, I felt it. Everyone's kind of like oohing and awing about it. Then I had another contraction, and at the end of this contraction, my hips did this like it was almost like a pelvic thrust, and I didn't do it. It was very involuntary. My hips just like thrusted forward, and as soon as they thrusted forward, I felt his head pop out. And I reached down and touched and felt his entire head, and it was still in the sack. And I, told everybody, I was like, his head's out, his head's out. Like, his head's out and he's still in the sack. And, everyone's so excited because the birth assistant had been there for like 15 minutes. The birth photographer had been there for 15 minutes. So pretty much as soon as they walked in, like, his head was out. The birth assistant had asked my mom to go and get a flashlight. So she was out looking for one. And I actually have a video that she took whenever I was almost having, I was about to crown. And it's literally, I don't know why, we were just, in the heat of everything, we didn't take any videos of anything. So I have 2 videos from the birth. One is this one that I'm going to put in here. My mom is going to kill me for putting this in here. She took this video and sent it to my dad. He texted and asked how I was doing. And so she took a video of me moaning and screaming outside of the bedroom door. My mom is going to kill me, but this video kills me. I think it is hilarious, especially because my mom didn't think I would share with anybody. So she's making the funniest face in it. This is literally like the only video that I have from the labor. So I will put it in here so you can see it. My mom was out looking for a flashlight for the birth assistant to use, and she heard me say his head is out, and so she came back in, and it was on the next contraction that I had that I reached down and grabbed him by the shoulders, so both of his shoulders came out, and I reached down and grabbed him and pulled him up out of the water and put him on my chest, and he was born. So he was on call up until the point that I pulled him out. So whenever I grabbed him, the sack broke and I pulled him out and he was not in the sack anymore. So he was on call almost until I grabbed him, and then I pulled him and it like popped and he pulled out of the sack. My mom walked in and she was able to capture kind of the immediate moments after he was born, and I'll put that in so you can see that too.
Look at your eyes wide open. Oh, that's so good. Oh, baby. He's right here. Oh, my God. Oh, my goodness. I'm going to slide in front of you. Oh, my goodness. Oh, look at your eyes.
And every single time I watch that video, I get so emotional because it was just the best moment. He let out this big cry and we were all just totally in awe of it. It was the most life-changing experience that I have ever had. he came out, and there were like two things that I immediately thought. The first thing was like, oh my God, you're so squishy and like wrinkly. He was so squishy, and he was all slimy. He wasn't bloody at all. I was holding him and I was just like, why are you so wrinkly? And the second thing was that he came out with his eyes wide open, and he came out, and literally as soon as I pulled him out, he looked right into my eyes and was just staring at me, and I was like, oh my gosh, like what just happened? And it was the most unbelievable moment ever. So we immediately had skin to skin, and I sat back in the birthing tub, and the birth assistant started checking his vitals and making sure that he was all good to go, and he was perfect. Everything was exactly as it needed to be. He was extremely healthy. Everything was looking great. And at this point, obviously, my midwife still was not there. So we sat in the tub and had skin to skin. I delivered my placenta. We definitely had delayed cord clamping. The placenta was delivered with no issues at all. I had to like bear down a little bit to get the placenta out, but it came out on its own. I think it came out within like 20 minutes or so, but it came out on its own, and we just put it in a bowl, and it was like floating in the water with us while I was holding him to my chest. And we just sat there for a little bit and enjoyed that immediate moment. I mean, I had no idea like what time it was or like which day it was. I was in this crazy, like, I don't know, hormone-filled, drugged-out state. It was the wildest experience ever, and I was just totally in awe. At that point, I was like, well, I guess I was in labor. I passed the baby up to the birth assistant, and immediately I like pulled myself up. I got out of the tub on my own. We had like prepared the bed so that if I did want to labor on the bed, that it wouldn't get ruined. So it had a bunch of layers of sheets and like puppy pads and waterproof stuff on it. So we were able to immediately get into our bed and lay with him. We had him on our chest. Ugh. That was the best time. We were just laying in bed and like oogling over him. Eventually the midwife shows up. My mom greeted her at the door, and she got out of her car and asked how I was doing. And my mom was like, well, she's had the baby, like they're all done. So she comes in and does all of the additional like vital checking on the baby and checking on me. At this point, having my doula was the best thing because she was focused solely on me. You know, everyone's focused on the baby, which absolutely makes sense. But my doula was 100% focused on me and making sure I had what I needed. So she was getting me apple juice and food. I was able to start breastfeeding. So I had him on my chest, and he started to kind of like root down to find my nipple, and he immediately latched, and we started breastfeeding, which was amazing. She weighed him, got his height, all that kind of stuff. And she checked on me to see if I had any tearing. I had barely any tears. She referred to them as skid marks, or, you know, barely first degree tear. She said she could stitch them, but she said that she thought they would heal fine on their own. So I opted not to have stitches and just let everything heal. She also wanted to make sure that my uterus was contracting the way that it needed to. So she, you know, pressed on my uterus to start that like shrinking process down. And whenever you breastfeed, your uterus will contract as well to start like getting down to its original size. So while I was breastfeeding, I definitely felt those contractions. And then she wanted me to go and use the bathroom before she left. Essentially, they will not leave until you have gone to the bathroom. So I went and sat on the toilet and tried to pee for a little bit. It was really difficult to pee immediately. I don't know why it was so scary to have to pee, but they gave me like a peri bottle, which you fill with water and spray on yourself whenever you're trying to pee. I had the water running to try and encourage it, and it took a while, but eventually it did, and it did not hurt as much as I thought it would, which was a nice relief. And then my doula came in and helped me take a shower, which was amazing. I got to like rinse off. I had not too much bleeding afterwards, actually. It was a pretty clean birth. They said that it was one of the cleanest births that they had seen, so I wasn't covered in blood, but I definitely still had some on me. So I got to take a shower and kind of like cleanse and regroup, and then we went back into the room and spent pretty much the next week just in there spending time with our new baby and kind of getting used to everything. And my mom went out and got us some food to eat. I really wanted something hearty, so she got us some broccoli and cheddar soup and bread, and we just had this amazing evening. It was, the middle of the day. So we got to spend this entire day with our newborn at home. And I have to say, being at home and having our own space, being in my own bed and having my own shower and having my dog, like having everything that makes me comfortable and happy was just amazing. And not having to pack up the baby and like drive home and drive back to the doctor. Our midwife came back and did a follow-up checkup on both me and the baby the next day. So we got to just stay home and have her come there, and it was just amazing. It honestly felt like we were on cloud 9 for like a solid week. And the hormones that your body releases when everything happens on its own naturally is just unreal. It literally felt like I was on drugs for an entire week. But I had someone ask me afterwards if I would have another home birth, and I would 1,000,000% only want to have a home birth. Assuming that all of my pregnancies moving forward are low risk and healthy, I will always opt to have a home birth because it was the most life-changing experience that I have ever gone through. And I think that's across the board for everyone who was involved. It was just as, textbook as it could have been for a birth. And it really set us up, I think, to have a great transition into parenthood and a great transition into breastfeeding. We got started off on the right foot, and we just had the support that we needed for those first few weeks with a newborn. It is honestly so amazing to watch what our bodies can do over this 9-month period of growing a human and carrying this human inside of you, and then being able to take that human and bring them earthside out through your vagina is just the most insane thing that I have ever done. And I think it really speaks to the power that women have and pregnant people in general have, and that if you have the right team supporting you and you do have a low risk healthy pregnancy, that there are other options out there for you besides going to a hospital. And if it's something that you're thinking about or something that you have ever considered, like I said, 100% recommend it if you have the right team in place to help you. I remember the things that scared me about having a home birth, and now having had one myself just don't scare me anymore, because I think if you have the right team in place and you have the right mindset and you've done all the research that you need to do to make sure that it's the best choice for you, that it is an amazing option. But that is the story of how Wilder was born. If you are pregnant and about to have your baby, or if you're thinking about having a home birth, hopefully my story maybe gave you a little bit of encouragement or insight into what it can be like to have a home birth. Like I said, it was just the best thing that I've ever done. My memory of my birth is going to be so positive for the rest of my life, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps me out so much in hopefully sharing this video with other people who are interested in home birth, so please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to my channel, definitely consider subscribing. I would love to have you for my next video, and be sure to hit the little notification bell next to subscribe so that you are notified whenever I upload anything new. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.